Someone says something designed to make you smaller, not in private, but in front of people whose opinion matters to you. Your face goes hot. Your jaw tightens. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, faced this kind of moment constantly and left behind private notes on exactly how he handled it. Years later, the hardest version of this test would come not from a rival, but from a general he trusted completely. 4 of his 5 techniques get you through the moment. The 5th changes how the whole exchange works. Most advice about anger tells you to breathe, count to 10, walk away. It treats the anger itself as the problem. Marcus Aurelius saw a different trap. The oldest trick in provocation is convincing you that if you do not react, you have already lost. He believed the real loss begins the moment your behavior becomes a reply to someone else's disorder. Whoever controls your reaction writes what happens next, and every one of the 5 moves that follow is really about taking that pen back. Most videos on this subject only ever cover the first one. Here is the first move. Expectation, not calmness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that he would meet people who were arrogant, dishonest, or looking for a fight, and that this was simply what some people do. He was not being pessimistic. He was removing the element of surprise. When you expect provocation as a normal part of dealing with people, it stops landing as a personal attack and starts registering as exactly what it is, a tactic aimed at a specific reaction. Once you can name the tactic, you start noticing its disguises. It's the colleague who prefaces a real insult with, "No offense, but..." It's the relative who turns an old mistake into a joke at dinner, timed for an audience. These moments are rarely random. Marcus does not use modern psychological language, but his notes point to a similar pattern. People often try to make someone else feel smaller first, out of their own insecurity. Seeing the mechanism does not excuse it, but it moves you from the center of the provocation to the edge, where you can actually think. The second move, separate the event from the verdict. This is the part almost every anger management video skips entirely. In Book 4 of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of something easy to state and hard to practice. What disturbs you is never the other person's action. It is your own judgment about it. One of the most quoted lines from that same journal puts it even more starkly. Choose not to be harmed, and you will not feel harmed. An insult is an event. Humiliation is the story you build around it afterward, and that story is yours to edit. This is not the same as pretending the words did not hurt. It means separating what was said from what it proves about you. Someone's contempt is information about their own state, their frustration, their insecurity, their habits built up over years you were not there for, which makes it a poor measure of your character, no matter how confidently it was delivered. He put it plainly. Their soul does the damage to themselves, not to him, unless he agreed to carry it forward on their behalf. There is a harder version of this idea Marcus Aurelius returned to often, the possibility that the person provoking you is not acting out of malice at all, but out of a genuine and mistaken belief that what they are doing is justified. That does not make it acceptable, and it does not mean you owe them anything. It changes what you are actually dealing with, an error in judgment rather than a personal war. And errors call for a different kind of response than war does. He also demanded honesty from himself here, and this is the part people skip because it is uncomfortable. In that same passage, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that he too had said careless things, judged people unfairly, and acted from his own blind spots more than once. He was not above the pattern he was criticizing in someone else. That admission works like insurance, keeping this whole approach from turning into quiet superiority instead of actual peace. Naming the tactic and depersonalizing it gets you halfway there. The third move is the pause, and it is what actually buys you time in the moment itself. From the outside, that pause looks empty. From the inside, it is full of work, the first wave of heat passing through you without being allowed to write your next sentence. The Stoics did not treat this pause as suppression. They treated it as the entire skill. In that pause, you are not doing nothing. You are checking a single question against what just happened. Is this something within my control to change right now, or only something I can choose how to interpret? Most provocations fail that test immediately. You cannot control what a coworker said in a meeting 5 minutes ago, and you cannot control what a relative thinks of you. You can control the next sentence out of your own mouth, which is the only part that was ever actually yours. The first 3 moves get you through the moment while it is happening. The 4th move decides whether it follows you home. And it is also the one Marcus needed most, years later, when the hardest test of his life came not from a stranger, but from a general who had fought beside him for years. Long before that betrayal, he had already built the tool he would need. He called it the view from above, imagining he was looking down at the argument from a great height, his own anger among it. One brief disturbance among millions of lives, most of them forgotten within a generation. It sounds abstract until you try it in the middle of an actual argument. This has nothing to do with feeling superior to the person in front of you. The goal is proportion, seeing the moment at its real size instead of the size panic gives it. Whatever was said in that meeting, at that dinner table, in that argument, will not be remembered by either of you in 5 years, let alone by anyone else. Most of what triggers real anger evaporates under that kind of scale, not because it did not matter at all, but because it mattered far less than it felt like in the actual moment. None of this means staying passive, and this is where a lot of people misread Stoicism completely. He still corrected people, disciplined soldiers, and made hard decisions as emperor. The point of the pause and the zoom out was never to avoid acting. It was to make sure the action came from a decision, not from a reflex someone else had deliberately triggered on purpose. There is a real difference between responding on purpose and reacting on command. Here is the 5th move: refusing to trade your composure for their approval. Every provocation has 2 authors, the person who starts it and the person who finishes it. Someone who provokes you is not really asking for an argument. They are asking for your reaction, and they have already planned around getting it, your voice rising, your composure breaking, proof that they got to you. The moment you decline to supply it, their entire approach stops working. They can provoke you. They cannot write your response. You have taken away the only thing they were actually there to collect. There is a line Marcus Aurelius returned to often. The best answer to a person like that is simply refusing to become like them. Your composure is the one thing they cannot take. You can only hand it to them. Not ignoring what happened, not pretending it did not sting, just declining to let their behavior set the terms for your own. Every time you match provocation with provocation, you have adopted their method, even while telling yourself the whole time that you were only defending yourself. This is harder in practice than it sounds on a page, and it will not feel satisfying while it is happening. Staying composed while someone is trying to bait you rarely feels like winning in the moment. What it actually buys you shows up afterward, in the version of the conversation you get to close the door on, instead of carrying it into tomorrow's meeting or next week's dinner, still running quietly in the background. None of these 5 moves becomes automatic on the first try. He wrote these reminders to himself for years, not because he had mastered them once and moved on, but because staying composed under provocation is a practice you repeat, not a personality trait you either have or lack. Every provocation you get through this way is another rehearsal. The version of you that pauses instead of reacting gets easier to reach each time you choose it on purpose. Practiced consistently, this does not make people stop trying to provoke you. It changes how much power any single attempt actually has left over you. The pause gets shorter to access. The zoom out becomes a habit instead of an effort you have to force. What used to cost you an entire afternoon of replaying an argument in your head starts costing you a few seconds of noticing it, naming it, and choosing not to hand over control. This was the moment the 5th move was actually tested. His own general, Avidius Cassius, the man from the opening of this video, declared himself emperor and rebelled against him. Marcus Aurelius reportedly told his officers he hoped to offer Cassius mercy rather than execution, and that he wished for the chance to reason with the man face to face. Cassius was killed by his own soldiers before that meeting could happen. Ancient sources say Marcus did not celebrate the news. We cannot know his private motives with certainty, but the story survived because it matched what his own journal already showed. A man trying, under real pressure, not to let someone else's disorder dictate his own. Next time someone tries to provoke you, do not ask, "How do I stay calm?" Ask a sharper question, "Who is choosing my next sentence?" From that moment on, your composure stops being about them and starts being about who you are becoming. Which of these 5 moves would have changed how your last argument actually ended? Tell us in the comments. We read all of them.